The storm showed no signs of stopping that night in Pine Hollow. Lightning slashed across the sky like jagged knives, and the rain poured down in relentless sheets, pounding the empty streets as if trying to wash away the town's deepest secrets. Sergeant William Hartley, a 44-year-old police officer with tired eyes and the quiet sadness of someone who had seen too much, was driving his patrol car through the near-deserted streets. The radio was silent. The only sound was the steady sweep of the windshield wipers. He was already picturing a hot shower and the familiar stillness of home when something made him slam on the brakes. Standing motionless near an old payphone, barely visible in the rain, was a small shadowy figure. It didn't move. It was just there, trembling. He opened the car door, and a cold gust of wind hit him like a slap to the face, sharp and bitter. Then came the sound, a soft, high-pitched cry. Not human, but desperate. A cry that cut through the rain, like a whisper from something broken. As William stepped closer, his breath caught in his chest. Curled up on the soaked sidewalk was a German shepherd puppy, drenched, shaking violently. Its wide eyes locked on his. But it wasn't just fear in those eyes. It was something deeper, a kind of silent pleading, a haunting sorrow, as if the little creature had seen more than it should have. William crouched down, his knees instantly soaked by the cold pavement. He extended his hand slowly, gently. The puppy didn't run. It didn't even flinch. It simply looked at him, then leaned forward weakly, resting its small head against his chest. The connection was instant and powerful. It felt like holding something fragile that had almost given up. William wrapped the puppy in his arms, pressing it to his chest, feeling its wet fur and erratic heartbeat. He didn't know it then, but that moment would stay with him forever. He hadn't just found a puppy. He had found something lost in himself, too. Back in the patrol car, the heat humming through the vents, William tried to dry the pup with an old towel. The little dog didn't make a sound. It just stared at him with those same dark eyes that didn't belong to a normal puppy. There was a heaviness in that gaze, something old, something damaged. That's when he noticed a collar, worn leather, small metal tag, but the name had been scratched off, as if someone had gone out of their way to erase the identity, erase the past. That detail, small as it was, sent a chill up William's spine. His instincts kicked in. This wasn't just a lost puppy. Something about this didn't add up. When he got home, a modest single-story house with a wooden porch and a soft porch light, his 11-year-old son Noah came running to the door. He stopped cold when he saw the dripping bundle in his father's arms. "Dad, is he hurt?" William shook his head. "No, just scared. We'll take care of him." That night, they wrapped the pup in a thick blanket by the fireplace. For the first time in a long while, the house felt warm, alive. Noah, beaming with excitement, named him Luca. The name just fit. But as Noah slept peacefully in the next room, William sat alone, staring at the dog, who now slept quietly near the flames. He couldn't stop thinking about that collar, about those eyes. He'd seen trauma before, and that little dog was carrying something heavy. At 3 a.m., a loud clap of thunder rattled the windows. Luca jolted upright, ears alert, eyes locked on the front window, as if sensing something no one else could. From the hallway, William stirred too, overcome with a strange unease in his chest. That night, when he opened the patrol car door and pulled Luca from the rain, he thought he was just doing the right thing. But he had no idea he had just let something into his home and into his life that would lead to a darkness he never could have imagined. The morning after the storm brought a strange stillness. The streets of Pine Hollow were damp and quiet, as if holding their breath. William stood by the kitchen counter, sipping his coffee without really tasting it, eyes locked on the puppy lying beneath the window. Luca hadn't barked, hadn't whimpered. He just sat in silence, staring outside like he remembered something terrible from far away. It was a silence that didn't belong to a dog his age. It was too heavy, too human. Noah sat at the table, spoon clinking gently in his cereal bowl. "Why doesn't he play like other dogs?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. William didn't answer at first. He watched Luca's eyes, following every move in the room. Quiet, alert, too focused. It reminded him of soldiers after war. Animals didn't normally look at you that way. Not unless they'd been through something they couldn't speak of but would never forget. At the local animal clinic, Dr. Whitmore ran a careful hand down Luca's back. Healthy, she said, but there's something odd here. She paused behind Luca's left ear, gently parting the fur. A scar, almost invisible, clean like a surgical cut that healed well. William's jaw tightened. Someone tried to hide it, she added. No ID, no chip, no trace. It's not just abandonment. Whoever had this dog didn't want him traced. The word stayed with him all the way home. William drove in silence, Luca seated beside him, not making a sound. He didn't pant, didn't fidget like a puppy should. He just stared out the window. William could feel something building in his chest, a tension he hadn't felt since his early days on the force. He glanced sideways and caught Luca watching him, not nervously but calm, measured, as if waiting for something. That night, after Noah went to bed, William sat in front of his laptop. He started digging through missing dog reports, filtering by breed, age, and region. Then, in a quiet corner of a forum, he found a phrase that made his fingers freeze over the keyboard. Project Echo. No context, no explanation. Just a name repeated by different people over several months. It didn't feel random. It felt like a warning or a cover-up. A soft click of claws on the wood made him turn. Lucas stood at the edge of the room, watching him in silence. William stared back, unease creeping up his spine. He didn't know what Project Echo meant. Not yet, but he knew one thing for sure. Luca hadn't come into their lives by accident, and something or someone was still out there. That night, William couldn't sleep. The wind outside had picked up again, brushing branches against the windows like fingers tapping from the dark. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying that phrase over and over, Project Echo. It echoed in his head like a ghost. He didn't know what it meant, but something deep in his gut told him it was connected to Luca. He wasn't just imagining it. There was something wrong, and it was getting closer. Down the hallway, a low growl broke the silence. William sat up instantly, heart pounding. He grabbed his flashlight from the nightstand and stepped out barefoot. Lucas stood at the far end of the hallway, his body stiff, his eyes locked on the front door. The growl was barely audible but filled the house like a siren. William froze. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Luca didn't move. He didn't blink. He was listening to something William couldn't hear. He moved slowly toward the door, sweeping the beam of his flashlight across the living room. Nothing. No movement. But the air felt heavier, like someone else had been there just seconds before. He opened the door cautiously, stepping out onto the porch. The yard was empty, but the gate he always kept locked, was open, swinging gently in the breeze. William's stomach dropped. He closed it quickly, checked the latch, then stood for a long moment, staring into the street. Every instinct in him flared to life. Back inside, Luca had settled back onto the rug, but hadn't taken his eyes off the door. William knelt beside him, placing a hand on his fur. "You felt it too, didn't you?" The dog didn't respond, but William already knew the answer. Something had been out there, watching, testing, and Luca had sensed it before he ever could. This wasn't just paranoia. It was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. The next morning, William drove to the station, not for work, but to use the secure database. He searched everything he could under Project Echo, but the system gave him nothing. Too vague, too protected. Whatever it wasn't meant for public eyes. Frustrated, he stepped outside for air and found a man standing by his car. Tall in a suit, mid-50s, no badge, no name tag. The man smiled politely, but his eyes were cold. "Nice dog you got there," he said. "Be careful who you trust these days." Before William could respond, the man was gone, slipping into a black SUV with no plates. William stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. He didn't tell anyone what had just happened. He just got in his car, drove straight home, and locked every door behind him. Because now he was sure of one thing. This wasn't just about a lost dog anymore. Someone knew he had Luca, and they were watching. William sat at the kitchen table, barely touching his coffee. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, but it brought no warmth. The house was quiet, too quiet. Every creak in the walls felt like a whisper meant only for him. Across the room, Luca lay on the floor, head on his paws, eyes wide open. He hadn't slept much, neither had William. After the visit from the man at the station, there was no more room for doubt. Someone out there was connected to Luca, and they wanted him found. He thought about going to police chief, telling her everything. But what would he say? That a stranger in a suit warned him about his own dog? That the pup he rescued from the rain might be part of something called Project Echo? It sounded crazy even to him. And William wasn't crazy. He was a cop, a father, a man who trusted facts, not feelings. But lately, the facts had all gone quiet, and the feelings were screaming. He decided to take Luca on a walk, thinking the fresh air might help clear his head. As they moved down the wooded trail behind the neighborhood, Luca's ears stayed up, his body tense. Every sound made him pause. Every bird call or rustling leaf felt like a warning. Halfway down the trail, Luca stopped dead in his tracks, staring into a dense patch of trees. William followed his gaze and froze. There, nailed to the bark of a tree, was a laminated flyer, faded and peeling from the rain. It was a photo of a dog that looked almost identical to Luca. Same eyes, same face. The word missing was scrawled in red marker across the top. William pulled the flyer down and flipped it over. There was no name, no contact, just a stamped set of letters in the corner. E42. His blood ran cold. That wasn't a phone number. That was a classification. Attack. Luca backed up slightly, his body trembling. William stuffed the paper in his pocket and turned around, heart pounding. Someone had been here recently, and they had left that flyer where only he would find it. Back home, William sat at his desk, the flyer laid out in front of him. He stared at it for a long time, until Luca walked over and rested his head on William's knee. There was fear in the dog's eyes. Not panic, not anxiety, but a deep, buried kind of fear, like someone who knew what it meant to be hunted. William ran a hand through Luca's fur. "What did they do to you?" he whispered. Luca didn't move, but William felt the weight of his silence settle into the room, like a second presence. That night, William locked every door, every window, and kept his service weapon close. The lights were out, the house quiet, but his mind raced. What was he 42? What was Project Echo? And how many more dogs like Luca were out there? He didn't know yet, but he was sure of one thing. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not even close. The wind had picked up again by the time night fell, howling through the trees like distant voices. William sat in the living room, lights dimmed, one hand resting on his lap, and the other gripping the cold steel of his service weapon. Luca was by the door, still and alert, his eyes fixed on the shadows outside. William had always trusted his instincts. They'd kept him alive on the job more than once. But tonight, it wasn't his instincts he was relying on. It was Luca's, and the dog hadn't relaxed in hours. Around midnight, Luca's ears perked up. A low growl rumbled from his chest. William followed his gaze toward the front window. Something had moved. He got up quietly, stepping toward the door, careful not to make a sound. He looked through the peephole. Nothing, just the empty street under a flickering lamppost. But the feeling didn't leave. It crawled under his skin, telling him someone was out there, watching, waiting. Minutes later, there was a knock. Not a normal one, just two slow, deliberate taps. Then silence. William stood frozen. Luca barked once, sharp, guttural, then went quiet again, tail stiff, body tense. William moved aside of the window and peered out carefully. A black SUV was parked across the street. Same one from the station. Same no license plate. But this time, someone was standing beside it, not moving, just facing the house. William gripped the doorknob, pulse racing, but didn't open it. He stayed still, his back to the wall, listening. After a long, tense minute, the SUV door closed, and the vehicle pulled away slowly into the night. When it was gone, William opened the door just a crack. There, sitting on the welcome mat, was a sealed manila envelope. No name, no markings. Just one single paper inside. A printed image of Luca in the back seat of William's patrol car. Taken the night he found him. William closed the door slowly and locked it, fingers trembling slightly. This wasn't random anymore. This wasn't someone looking for a lost pet. Whoever these people were, they knew where he lived. They were watching him. And now, they wanted him to know it. The envelope sat in the middle of the table like it was ticking. William hadn't opened it right away. He just stared at it, the weight of it pressing into his thoughts like a stone on his chest. Lucas sat beside him, ears perked, eyes shifting between the door and his owner's face. The silence in the house was absolute. No TV, no music, not even the sound of the fridge humming. Just the soft breathing of a man who knew his life had officially stepped out of his control. When William finally tore the seal, his hands were steady, but his heart wasn't. Inside, there was only one item, a high-resolution photo, printed on thick paper. It showed the interior of his patrol car the night of the storm, with Luca curled up in the passenger seat. The image had been taken from behind, through the rear window, and it was clear, too clear. Whoever took it had been close. Close enough to follow him without being seen. Close enough to choose not to be noticed. He flipped the photo over. Written in block letters and permanent black marker were 5 chilling words. Return him before it begins. No contact. No threat. No demand. Just a message and a timeline he couldn't see. William leaned back in his chair, staring at the words as if they'd start bleeding through the paper. What did they mean by before begins? What was beginning? He didn't have answers. But he had a sinking feeling that something had already started. The next day, he took Luca for a drive, not just to get out of the house, but to test something. Every turn, every mirror check, William watched for signs that he was being followed. Nothing. But Luca remained tense the entire ride, eyes always on the horizon, as if waiting for someone to appear. William drove through town, past the diner, past the old mill, all the way to the far edge of Pine Hollow, where the woods thickened and the cell signal faded. Still, no one came, but the stillness in the trees felt like the world was holding its breath. Back home, Noah was waiting with questions. Dad, is something wrong with Luca? William looked at his son for a long time, not sure how much truth to give him. He's special, he said finally, and someone out there wants him back. Noah didn't speak for a moment, then sat beside Luca and placed a hand on his fur. Then we have to protect him, right? William nodded slowly, feeling that knot in his chest tighten again. Protecting Luca wasn't just about keeping a dog safe anymore. It was about keeping something buried from being unleashed. That night, while William sat on the porch with Luca at his feet, a strange stillness hung in the air. The trees didn't move, the air didn't shift, but in the quiet, William felt it. Not a sound, not a shadow, but something watching, waiting. Something that knew exactly where they were and something that had no intention of letting them go quietly. The following morning, William returned to the woods, the same trail where he had found the missing dog flyer days earlier. But this time, he wasn't walking Luca. He went alone. He needed answers, and deep down, he felt the forest might remember something it hadn't shown him the first time. The cold air bit at his face as he moved quietly beneath the canopy of trees. There was no wind, no bird song, just the crunch of dead leaves under his boots. Then he saw it. Something half buried beneath the roots of a tree. He knelt down, brushing away dirt and wet leaves until he revealed the edge of a metal box. Small, dented, locked. It looked old, weathered but deliberate. Not something someone dropped, something someone hid. William brought it home and cracked it open with tools in the garage. Inside, there were photographs, dozens of them. Most were black and white, some color, all showing German shepherds in cages, labs, and fenced training yards. They were all tagged with the same red letters. He followed by numbers, E18, E29, E42, Luca's number. William's hands trembled as he flipped through the photos. The expressions on the dogs' faces were eerily similar. Not aggressive, not wild, but resigned, like soldiers before deployment. In one corner of a group photo, there was a blurry image of a man, tall in a dark suit, the same kind of man who had approached him at the station. William stared at the picture, his jaw tightening. This wasn't just a random project. This was organized, funded, hidden. That night, William didn't speak much. He didn't tell Noah about the box. He couldn't, not yet, but Luca wouldn't leave his side. Every step William took, the dog followed, not like a pet, like a partner, like he knew something was about to shift. And William could feel it too. That envelope, the photos, the tracking, they all pointed to one truth. Luca had escaped from something, but no one escapes forever. Eventually, the past catches up. After putting Noah to bed, William placed the photos back into the box and locked it. Then he opened his laptop again. This time, he didn't search by keywords. He searched by the codes: E42, Echo Program, Classified Dog Experiments. First, nothing. Then, a single link buried deep in a forgotten forum. A whistleblower post, half erased, partially corrupted, describing a behavioral weaponization trial involving dogs raised in isolation, trained for loyalty, survival, and obedience beyond natural limits. And Luca had been one of them. William couldn't stop staring at the screen. The whistleblower's post was fragmented, like someone had tried to delete it or hide it. What was left painted a picture more disturbing than anything he had imagined. The program had a name: Echo Behavioral Adaptation Initiative, funded off the books. No government stamp, no paper trail, just results. Dogs bred not only for strength or obedience, but for psychological conditioning. Trained to respond to commands only specific handlers knew. Trained to be silent, aware, and if needed, dangerous. Luca had been one of them. That much was clear now. But what William couldn't understand was why. Why would anyone train animals this way and then let them vanish? Or worse, why were they being hunted down again? One line in the post stood out, blurry but intact. Subjects showing emotional attachment must be terminated. Emotional deviation equals failure. He read it twice, then a third time, and slowly, a cold realization settled in his chest. Luca had bonded with him, with Noah. That wasn't supposed to happen. Outside, thunder rumbled low and distant, like a warning. William closed the laptop and turned off the lights. The photo of Luca in the car, the envelope, the flyer in the woods, they weren't just messages. They were warnings. And if what he had just read was true, whoever was behind the Echo program might already consider Luca a liability, which meant they were now targets too. He found Luca lying by Noah's door, guarding him. The boy slept soundly inside, unaware of the storm brewing around him. William knelt down and whispered, "They're coming, aren't they?" Luca didn't move, but his tail tapped once against the floor. It wasn't an answer. It was an acknowledgement. Quiet yes. William reached out and scratched behind Luca's ears. "I'm not giving you up," he said, voice steady, "no matter what they send." The next morning, the decision was made. William called in a favor from an old friend, someone who owed him more than a few. They needed to disappear for a while, just long enough to understand what they were really up against. He packed only what mattered: documents, supplies, a few photos, and Luca's blanket. When Noah asked where they were going, William just said, "Somewhere safe." But even as they drove away from Pine Hollow, William knew the truth. Now that they were running, the real hunt had just begun. They drove through the night, following empty highways and back roads until the sun began to rise behind the mountains. William had chosen a cabin in northern Vermont, isolated, surrounded by trees, with no internet, no neighbors, and no connection to Pine Hollow. The kind of place where no one accidentally shows up. But even here, far from everything, the feeling of being hunted never left him. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other close to the pistol hidden in the glove compartment. Luca sat behind him, eyes wide open, body still, always watching. By the second night, Noah began to ask the real questions. "Dad, who's after Luca?" William hesitated. He wanted to protect his son from the truth, but there was no more space for lies. "There are people who used him," he said. "People who don't like that he got away." Noah nodded slowly. "But he's just a dog." William shook his head. "No, son, he's more than that. And they don't want him loved. That's what scares them." The boy didn't say anything, but the way he reached out to hold Luca's paw told William he understood more than he let on. That night, William couldn't sleep. He walked outside, flashlight in hand, scanning the trees. The air felt different. Not cold, just still, like the forest itself was waiting for something to happen. Then Luca growled. William spun around. Between the trees, faint but unmistakable, were beams of light moving slowly, silently. Flashlights. 3, maybe 4 figures, black clothes, no voices. William's training kicked in instantly. He stepped back into the cabin and locked the door behind him. He woke Noah, whispered instructions into his ear, then handed him a small backpack. Go down the trapdoor. Stay quiet. Don't come out until I say. Luca didn't need to be told what to do. He stayed close to Noah, blocking the door to the basement with his body. William positioned himself by the front window, weapon loaded, breathing steady. He wasn't going to shoot unless he had no choice. But something in his gut told him this wasn't going to end quietly. They hadn't come for negotiation. They'd come to clean up a mess. A knock, then silence. William's heart pounded in his ears. A voice came through the door, calm and clinical. You have something that belongs to us. You know what needs to happen. William didn't respond. He stared at the door like it might explode at any moment. The voice returned, colder now. We don't need the boy, just the dog. Don't make this harder than it has to be. And that was it, the final line. They didn't see Luca as a living soul. They saw a failed experiment, a threat to be neutralized. William stepped forward, finger on the trigger, voice strong. He's not going anywhere. Silence again. Then a whisper, not from outside, but from inside himself, a knowing that this night would decide everything for him, for Noah and for Luca. The dog who had stopped being just a dog the moment he chose to stay. The door burst open with a crash. William fired a warning shot and ducked behind the couch. The figures that rushed and moved like trained soldiers. Fast, quiet, focused. But Luca was faster. He launched himself toward the first intruder with a bark that echoed through the cabin. The man went down hard, screaming as Luca clamped onto his arm with a force born from more than instinct. It was memory. Luca knew these people. The others froze for a moment. Luca wasn't attacking like a wild dog. He was choosing. His eyes didn't show confusion, only recognition and rage. William fired again, forcing the rest back through the door. The fight ended quickly. The team hadn't expected resistance. They retreated, one of them limping into the woods. Then the cabin fell quiet, except for heavy breathing and Luca's low growl fading into silence. William ran to Luca, checking his side. Just a shallow cut. You're okay? He whispered, cradling him for a moment. Noah climbed out the trapdoor, pale but safe. He knelt beside Luca and hugged him tight. The 3 stayed there, surrounded by broken wood and spent shells, knowing everything had changed, but also that they were still together. And that meant something. At dawn, William made one call, an old journalist friend. He sent everything, the photos, the codes, the truth. Tell the world, he said. They can't bury this again. He knew it would draw attention, maybe danger, but silence had already done enough damage. It was time to speak, no matter the cost. Weeks passed. Headlines followed. Project Echo exposed. Former cop leaks Black Ops files. But the program vanished, just like before, disappeared, maybe forever. William didn't chase it. He had Luca. He had Noah. That was enough. They moved far away to a quiet town near the coast. A new beginning. Finally theirs. Luca changed too. He ran freely, watched over Noah like a guardian, slept in the sun without fear. He rarely barked. He didn't need to. William often caught him staring at the horizon, not afraid, not angry, just remembering. He had survived something most wouldn't understand. But now he was home, and for the first time in his life, he was allowed to just be loved.